AskReddit. What is a fate worse than death? Hi guys. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell to get you updated of our new uploaded videos. Thanks and enjoy watching. Everything leading up to dying in the ICU. Families of 85+-year-olds with multiple comorbidities force us to keep doing everything to keep people alive far beyond any chance of recovering with any quality of life or dignity. Ever done CPR on a frail old body that weighs 95 pounds? The feeling of the cartilage and ribs crushing under your hands is something we never forget. After a few rounds of compressions, you can see a very obvious cavity in the chest that we have smashed into oblivion. And all for what? So the person can die in misery? Often, these people have written "do not resuscitate" and "do not intubate" requests, but the family can override these once the patient is unable to participate in the conversation. Then we get people 85+ years old with catastrophic strokes. The family decides to do everything, so the patient ends up with a truck, hole in the neck on a ventilator, breathing machine, a PEG tube in the stomach for liquid tube feeding, and resigned to bed rest for the remaining miserable months of their life. They will probably ultimately die of a steady but slow weight loss, horribly infected wounds from prolonged immobility. I have seen bed sores down to the bone and large enough to fit my fist into. Or infection, like pneumonia. All for what? Then you get the younger ones, but the ones who are far past any sense of recovery. Some of the worst to watch are people with liver failure from alcohol abuse. They go through severe and difficult to manage alcohol withdrawal, in which they are confused, combative and hallucinating. They are often sedated to the best of our ability and restrained for their own safety. Then come the bleeding problems associated with liver failure. I've seen someone go from talking to me and laughing to dying by vomiting all of the blood from their body due to esophageal varices, bleeding arteries in the throat stomach. It looked like a murder scene, and the patient was awake and aware she was dying as she bled out in front of us. So if you talk to anybody who works in critical care, they will often have many examples of things worse than death. We essentially torture people every day. We see that slow, inevitable spiral down. We try our best to be realistic with patients and families, but it often doesn't work. Being burned alive. I saw a guy that was playing with gasoline get burned alive. The smell and sounds that he made were something I will never forget. Luckily it only lasted him a few minutes before he passed out. But the next 10 years and hundreds of surgeries were terrible. He said many times we should have let him die, being forced to live in a vegetative state on life support because your friend's family won't let you go, having to deal with the pain of radiation for a long period of time. Hisashi, yes, that's his last name, is an example of this. He had to deal with the pain after being exposed to a fatal dose of radiation after a nuclear power plant accident. He was kept alive for 83 days after the accident. God, I can't imagine the pain he had to endure. I think that having a child disappear and never knowing what happened is likely the worst thing in the world. Holding out hope. Never knowing when it is appropriate to stop looking. Even when your despair seems too much to bear for even one more day, you know that killing yourself would end any possibility of being reunited, seeing everyone close to you die. It makes you wish you died with them, being paralyzed and blind for your whole life, torture or slavery for about 80 years, prolonged solitary confinement. Roman used to erase people from history as a punishment worse than death. It was called damnatio memoriae. From a philosophy POV is horrible, and I think I would be horrified to be condemned to this sentence, but I think the worst is probably to live a life of misery by being slaved and tortured. There is a story about a fireman, which I admit, I cannot verify, who received third-degree burns over pretty much his entire body. After almost a decade of pain and skin crafts and looking like something out of a horror film, his doctors asked him if it was worth it. He replied that he wished he had died that day. There's like an infinite amount worse fates. For example, a trickster god just turns you into a sentient rock and drops you off in a wasteland. That's it forever. You can think and have senses, but you can't move because you trapped as a rock. You just sit there forever staring into the waste and try to occupy yourself. To die, you can't sleep, all you can really do is think. Eventually, you'll be buried and won't be able to tell what time it is. Eventually, you would hope to yourself, the sun will explode and my stony form will be destroyed by the solar fire and end my miserable excuse for an existence. Now with COVID going around, old people who are suffering from it and fighting for their lives for 2 or 3 weeks in the hospital, knowing they aren't getting better. Dying slowly without having contact with family or friends because they don't have a cell phone or etc. Suffering for weeks and eventually dying seems horrible, not only from COVID but also from cancer. Being forced to watch your children brutally murdered and then being brainwashed into believing that it was your fault. Uncontrolled schizophrenia, probably life in prison, just a completely pointless existence. Being eaten alive by an animal, a lifetime of explosive diarrhea, burying your children, being stuck behind slow people. How do we actually know if death is really that bad or not? It could be amazing. DIPG.IT', a cancer of the brainstem that mainly affects children. The brainstem controls the most basic functions of life. Breathing, heartbeat, etc. Mike the headless chicken lived on because he still had a brainstem. As cancer progresses, it takes more and more of the kid's abilities while keeping their personality and intelligence intact. Imagine being 7 or 8 and one day you can walk and the next you can't. Or one day you can swallow and the next you can't. All the while you're still all there in your head, so you know everything that's going on. DIPG is considered terminal at diagnosis. Neil Armstrong's young daughter died of it before he went to the moon. Working in retail, being suicidally depressed for well over a decade, making an amazing recovery and turning your life around, getting a very few good years. Then developing early onset Alzheimer's dementia that makes you believe you're back in your depressing years for the rest of your life, having your feet slowly basted over an open fire and then turned into pulled pork, and then being force-fed it. Hear me out. If a Deadpool, Wolverine, etc. can heal super fast, what are they meant to do if a building collapses on them or they get trapped underwater? That for ages sounds pretty rubbish. Having your dad delete your 4-year running Minecraft hardcore mode save file. This monotonous 9-5, go to the same place, do the same thing, have the same conversations with the same people, being encased in stone for thousands of years, but when you finally get out you try get this big red gem, but this American, his Italian friend and his 50-year-old mom fight you, and ultimately end up sending you to space forever. To enjoy more of our curated content vlog, be sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell down below. Please also like our videos and your comments will be much appreciated. Thanks.